Before we start, I have a quick question. How much of your design time is actually spent on design? The answer is probably not enough. Archol can change that. Archol simplifies the early design workflow so that teams spend less time managing files, setup and handoffs, and more time working on design. Most designers using Archol save 4 hours or more per week, which is time back for better ideation, more iterations, or honestly, just getting home a bit earlier. And if you're a Rhino user, you definitely need to try Archol. They just launched a one-of-a-kind Rhino integration with no scripts, no manual setup, just floor plans, data, and presentations done auto-magically from your Rhino designs. For more design time and fewer headaches, try Archol for free at archol.io/architectette. That's arcol.io/architectette. Welcome to Architectette, the podcast where we celebrate women who are shaping the built environment and redefining what it means to lead in architecture and related AEC industries. I'm your host, Caitlin Brady. Each episode features a candid conversation with professionals who are challenging industry norms, advancing innovative designs, and transforming communities. From career highlights to the stories behind visionary projects, Architectette is your go-to space to learn, connect, and get inspired. Let's introduce today's guest. Christele Harrouk is a French-Lebanese architect, urban designer, and editor-in-chief of ArchDaily. With over a decade of editorial experience, she explores architectural and urban narratives and amplifies underrepresented voices, all while contributing to global architectural discourse. Her work focuses on making architectural knowledge more accessible, fostering broader conversations, and critically engaging with the future of the field. On today's episode, we talk about Christele's career journey and how feeling like she didn't quite fit in within traditional practice led her to experiment with careers in architecture, writing, and even fashion, and how those roles eventually led her to her impactful job at ArchDaily. In regards to her career, we talk about being an architect with a capital A who writes, rather than just a journalist, and why careers in editing, curation, and research are just as much a part of the profession as those who build. We also discuss more about ArchDaily's content curation, how they sort through thousands of project submissions, and what ultimately influences the people and projects they choose to highlight. We also talk about content overload and social media, and why ArchDaily is focusing on value rather than trends and algorithms and all of those things that are a little bit more short-lived. We end by talking about Christele's perspective on emerging professionals, student competitions, and technology's influence on the field. All links to connect with Christele are going to be in the show notes. If you love the podcast and want to help us grow, share it with a friend, subscribe, and also leave us a comment and review. We would love to hear your thoughts, and these things help us grow. You can see additional videos and photos from this episode on Instagram at Architectette, on LinkedIn at the Architectette Podcast, and you can sign up to receive our monthly newsletter, which has some highlights and behind-the-scenes info from the podcast at architectette.com/newsletter. That's architectette.com/newsletter. Thank you for listening and enjoy this episode. Christele, welcome to Architectette. I am very thankful that you had time to join me tonight, and I'm excited to talk all about your work and the things you're doing at ArchDaily. Welcome.
Thank you, Caitlin.
So before we talk about that role, let's talk a little bit about what career steps you took to get to where you are today. Do you mind sharing more about your background, your education, where you grew up?
Okay, so I studied architecture and I have a master's degree in architecture, and then I studied urban design. So technically I spent 10 years in different universities, studying architecture. When I was still studying, I was writing for several magazines. I was also an assistant professor. I was also an assistant for someone's PhD thesis. So I was always involved in writing somehow, and I never knew what that meant. Even when I was studying architecture or urban design, I was always the one that comes up with like text, and things that are more editorial and analytical than actually a build type of product final outcome. So for me, it kind of came naturally, but it took a long time. During my 20s, I was always trying to find answers, trying to find what is it that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I worked in several offices. I tried doing different things, and a traditional type, let's say, of path wasn't exactly where I saw myself. I never knew what I wanted to actually do or be. I was just trying different things. But I was sure that every time I end up, let's say, in a traditional type of, let's say, position, I felt like something was off. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I kept trying, experimenting here and there in different things. I even went into fashion at some point before I went on to study urban design. I wanted just to try and understand what is it that I actually want to do, what is it that I'm actually good at, and where do I actually feel like I belong, and what is it, what when am I like, I was trying to find my journey mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, I was always writing, and I was working for a local magazine here in French in Lebanon. I grew up in Lebanon, I studied in Lebanon, but I've always traveled back and forth between here, France, and different also countries in Europe. I was living a bit in Milan, then in Berlin at some point, but now I'm back here. I feel more grounded here. In 2019, there was an open position online on ArchDaily. At the time, I had established my small office, and I was a bit irritated from a couple of conversations with clients. And I saw that opening for a content editor, and I applied. And a couple of months later, a couple of tests later, I got that position. And that's how my career started with ArchDaily. 7 years later, here I am. I was a content editor first, and then a senior editor, and then I became the managing editor of the English website. And in the summer of 2024, if I'm not mistaken, I need to double check that, I became the editor-in-chief of ArchDaily. So it was quite, I don't want to say by chance, like I kind of built a lot of experience for that, but it wasn't an outcome that I was seeing when I would first starting to study architecture, for example.
And so you mentioned not really feeling at home in some of the practices or the firms that you were working in. What was the difference then that when you transitioned to ArchDaily that you, like, what were the qualities that made you feel like, okay, this is a good fit for me?
I mean, it's a gut feeling.
Okay.
But also, I've always been more interested in the earlier process when you are researching, when you are rethinking questions, thematics, when you're also challenging the status quo. That was always kind of my strong point, but also this is what I understand of architecture also. So that was very important for me. And I saw that I wanted to do a lot of things in that, let's say, department. I felt like there are a lot of stories that I want to tell. I felt like there are a lot of stories that no one knows about. I also felt like my understanding of architecture is not complete enough. Like there's so much more to know and to understand before actually getting to build something. I came to that, so let's say, understanding way later on. I didn't have that in my 20s. I was just trying to experiment with different things to understand who I am and what I wanted to do.
Especially when you first get into the profession, there's so many different areas that you could drill down into and learn expertise. And I remember at my first job, I think a guy was like retiring, and we were having a cake for him, and congrats on your retirement. And he was sharing advice with everyone, as people tend to do in these times. And I think he was saying that architects know a little bit about many things. And so I've always tried to keep that with me of, there's many things out there. I'm always learning little bits more about different aspects, but there's a lot to talk about. And so in terms of your role now as editor-in-chief, what are different stories that are important for you to tell? And then I'll ask after, what are stories that you think are important for people to hear or to read?
You know something? Actually, my father used to tell me the same thing that you just mentioned, that my dad is also an architect.
Okay.
So he mentioned that when you're an architect, you know a little about a lot of things and you get to be whatever you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of also a push that I had in the back of my mind. So going back to ArchDaily, I think what is important for us is, of course, looking at the globe, looking at the entirety of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And representation is one of the most important things. And this is why we have curators and editors based around the world. Because I've always believed that no one can tell your story better than you can tell it. So for us, what is very important is adjusting a lot of the narratives that exist or that don't even exist. Mm-hmm. So even when we were studying architecture, I studied in a school that follows a French system. we're not really exposed to the world. We're not exposed to the thematics of the world, to the challenges of the world. There are a lot of similarities, which I think it's actually very eye-opening because it brings us together. But there are a lot also of different narratives and different stories and things that you would never imagine. So I think this is part of the things that we really thrive, that we really actually try to do in ArchDaily. And I think we've been doing a good job for the past 17 years in really looking at the world, at focusing on underrepresented, for example, territories, at understanding architecture a bit with a big A beyond what traditional architecture is. That's why we look at cities, we look at communities, we look at what people are doing. We look at spaces, at experiences, at how people are feeling in these spaces. So it's really also expanding the definition of what architecture is, or what most of us, at least in the early 2000s, were taught. So these are very important things that we really do. These are the foundations of our work and our guiding kind of concepts at ArchDaily. And in terms of what people want to hear, I think people really want to hear local stories from around the world, because as I mentioned, there are a lot of similarities around the world. Like it might look different, but it is the same problem, with a different, let's say, context or wrapped in a different way. But the challenges are a bit similar, in my opinion. I think people want to understand and want to see what other people are doing about that problem, to try to see, okay, would that work for us? How can we contextualize this? How can we learn from this? I think people really want to learn from each other, in my experience. I think people want to be inspired also by each other. I think people love to hear great success stories from all over the world, because this makes them feel like we can also do it. We can also achieve that, whether it's on an urban level, whether it's on a smaller scale, whether it's related to communities, to how communities can actually change their cities, their spaces, their public spaces, the way they live. So yeah, I would say people love that from my experience.
So for those types of stories, is it hard to find them? Are people, I know you can submit to the website. I'm sure you guys probably are scouting stories as well, but how then do you find those compelling, both local and also global stories, probably then peppered in too with, the Starchitects and the big projects that a lot of people want to
Yeah.
read about?
I mean, we have projects which people could submit to. We receive a lot of projects and we curate. Like, basically, what we publish is less than 1 in 5 projects we receive. Like, I mean, curation is one of the main things that we do. So, what should be on the website? It's one of the main questions that we ask ourselves on a daily basis. So, you have that part. So, as I mentioned, people submit, but we also have we do a lot of proactive search. We look at territories that we haven't been looking at. We look at areas or territories where we know something interesting is happening. We know that there are emerging architects, but we need to reach out to them to push them to submit, for example. This is from a project's perspective. And when I say projects, it means like it's built projects.
Okay.
And then you have everything related to editorial, to articles, and to news. Yes, people do submit, but a lot of it also comes from our research, but also from our internal network and external network. Internal network in terms of all the editors and all the curators that are based around the world, and external network in terms of all the connections that we've built with architects, with cities, with decision makers, with writers, with different people from the field.
And so once you've assembled these amazing stories, you have the amazing projects, you've scouted them from unique locations or kind of up and coming hotspots that you all have identified, there's a lot of media out there. How does your team stay relevant, stay competitive when people have 10 different social media platforms, video, writing, print? How does ArchDaily stay competitive?
I mean, we do not compare ourselves, that's for sure. For
Okay.
me, what ArchDaily offers is very different than any other media platform. And the reach of ArchDaily is also quite different. We obviously have a lot of following from the Global South. So, I mean, for us, we do everything that we do with care. We do it because we feel responsible for putting certain stories out there, for highlighting projects. We're all architects in ArchDaily, so I think this is also quite different than other media platforms. We're not journalists. We don't pretend to be. We're architects who write.
Oh. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. I'll come back to that too. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, so we're architects who write. We're very much scientific in our approach. It's everything is based on sources, on facts. We do have some more opinion side, like in terms of certain pieces. Even those are very much based on sources, very much based on facts. So this is one of the main things that we do, and we have very strict criteria in terms of our curation, in terms of what are the narratives that we want to push, what are our guiding concepts, and I mean, ArchDaily is quite a reference for architecture in terms of how people use it. So people use it on a daily basis, let's say for news. People use it, they go back to it to research certain things, whether it's in the editorial side or whether it's in the project database. So it's quite a tool, a daily tool for architects when they're studying architecture, when they become practitioners and they have the project on ArchDaily, but even also for brands, for manufacturers, for different things. So for us, what was very important is that, I mean, the way that ArchDaily was built, it's a tool that stays with you. Like when I was studying architecture, I was on ArchDaily 24/7.
Yep, me too.
It was my main reference, you know? So, I mean, you can't have access to books, but to a certain amount of books. Also, for researching, it's quite different. You know, it's not because I work at ArchDaily, but it's a daily tool for architects. It's a daily reference for architects. And we're trying as much as possible to make it quite complete in the sense that everything an architect might need, they could find it on ArchDaily. That's why I would say it's not really comparable to other platforms because it's not a magazine. It like basically it's a reference. It has different, let's say, outcomes, but it's not a magazine. It's a tool.
Yes. Okay. I can see it. I see it in that way because I can only imagine that you might feel pressure. At least I'll speak from my perspective as someone with a podcast, right? I feel pressure to, oh, it's not just audio. I should do video now too. And I should put it on YouTube. And then people want to see clips on social media. And, oh, am I writing content to go along with all of this? And it's like, oh my gosh, like I just started an audio platform. And then now all of a sudden it's like, you'd be more effective if you branched out to all of these. Do you feel in terms of just curation, what you're putting out at ArchDaily, it seems like maybe if you have felt the pressure, you have kind of this belief of it just needs to be quality content and what we're doing works and just kind of sticking with that rather than evolving to try to keep up with all the trends. Is that a correct interpretation maybe?
It is actually, but I did feel the pressure at some point, you know, because we live in such a fast-paced world, social media driven. It's a lot of information. I mean, I'm saturated with information at some point. So I think now what we're doing is, I don't want to say taking a step back, but we're not going into that direction for sure. That's, let's say, curation now for us is even more important than before. Like we always ask ourselves, why does this matter? In what context does it sit? How does it contribute to the general, let's say, architectural discourse? How does it serve architecture? So for us, just by the fact that we're a tool, our main thing is that we want to serve the architectural community, but also the architecture profession in general. So obviously, we still cater to social media, etc., but through different things. So I wouldn't say we need to keep up with certain things, but we're kind of slowing down, slowing down and focusing more on value, on quality, on also prioritizing on who we are, you know. So I don't want ArchDaily to look like to become something that it's not, something different, just because this is what is happening around the world.
Yes. Well, I appreciate we need less TikTok dances out there. So if you're standing against it, I'll stand with you.
I'm not dancing on TikTok.
Nope, me neither. I'll watch other people. I'll scroll through, but yeah, that's not happening on Architectette. So I'm glad ArchDaily, we're standing together on that. So you had mentioned in your last response that you don't consider yourself a journalist, or your team doesn't consider themselves journalists. The identity as an architect, I think, is something that a lot of people grapple with, right? Like, do we fit that Mies van der Rohe, Corbusier, all the Franks? Are we fitting into that? Women, we have Zaha, but like, what is this stereotypical architect, and then if you don't follow in that path, are you successful? Are you not technically an architect? And people who do architecture but fall into different categories, like maybe tech or consulting or something that's not specifically architect and architecture firm, may feel excluded. In your role, how do you look at yourself? Obviously, you still call yourself an architect, and do you feel that others also consider you an architect, or do they consider you journalist?
I think I always correct them. I make it a point.
Good. Yep.
Because for me, I always say I'm an architect who writes. Everyone in ArchDaily is an architect, but they are architects who are curating. They are architects who are writing. They are architects who are editing, who are asking questions, who are adjusting the narrative. So for me, I've never felt, as I mentioned in the intro, I've never felt like a traditional path was fitting for me. I felt like it was too limiting. I felt like I could do more. I could be something different. I never knew what, So, but I'm quite grateful that I got to the realization eventually after years that I am still an architect. I'm not building, I'm writing, I'm doing all these things. Basically, ArchDaily is also shaping the architecture discourse. It's shaping what people consider is a good architecture. So hell yeah, we're architects, full on architects. I mean, we do have a lot of editors who still practice architecture. I personally don't, in a sense that I don't build. I'm more on the conceptual, analytical research kind of that's my mindset anyways. But we have people who practice it in different ways, in different contexts. Also, not just architects, landscape architects, urban, interior, graphic, scenographers, curators. So all of again, architecture with a big A. I talk a lot about alternative careers in architecture, and I get that question a lot, especially from students. Like, okay, when we finish architecture, what does that mean for us? What should we do next? What can we do next? So I think becoming an architectural editor is quite also an extension of the things that you could do that I never thought of. I never knew that it also existed or it was possible. And I'm very happy that I get to actually explain this to people, to tell them you could do that, you could teach, you could work with communities. There are I would say, infinite possibilities. And the most important thing is that whatever you do, it looks like you and it's not limiting. So I will say, don't put yourself in a box and don't follow any path that doesn't feel like it's your own. And it doesn't need to look like anything else. It just needs to look like you.
I totally agree. I think the profession has so much variety.
Yeah.
People can definitely find a space within it, and they shouldn't squeeze themselves into a box just because they want to be perceived a certain way. Maybe their strengths, like yours is writing. I know some architects not very good at writing, and that's okay because they're better at other things. Does your team ever hire non-architects to write about the profession and the industry?
No.
Okay. Why is that? No sports journalists coming to join ArchDaily, or I think about Jane Jacobs, who is one of I love The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Yeah. I love her work and her research and just all the thoughts that she has contributed to our industry. But she comes from a different perspective. If Jane Jacobs were around, would you hire her? Or you go, oh, nope, not an architect. We hire
Jane
architects.
Jacobs, I would, but I mean,
okay.
She comes from if I'm not mistaken, she has a more sociologue kind of background, right? Which anyways, which also fits in certain sense. I'm not saying that no, if you're not an architect. In my opinion, because we're not doing a descriptive type of work, so we're not just, the project's descriptions are things that are submitted by the architectural firms. What we need to do is to read through it, to understand this and to understand the quality of it. That's why you need to be an architect or you need to be within that field. If Jane Jacobs decides to submit, she'll send me a text and probably I'll be super crazy about what she writes. She tackles urban issues which we are now tackling. I don't see her as someone out of the profession or how she thinks about people, communities, etc. boundaries are now very much blurred. So yeah, I mean, you didn't say someone who works in sports, for example.
No.
You said Jane
Yeah.
Jacobs. So
Yes. Yeah. I guess, I mean, maybe if there's like a stadium project or something, a sports writer might, I don't know. They would prioritize stats and all of that. But so
probably.
if you're receiving all of these project descriptions, and oh gosh, at a firm, I don't know, 2 or 3 firms ago, I helped kind of contribute a lot of, we were submitting to all these websites, and it's hard to know, like, I worked on the project, so this is what's special to me, but this is what's
Mm.
special to the client, but what would be special to someone who's reading? When you're looking through these projects, what stands out to you? And I know you mentioned you're definitely targeting specific project types or locations, or making sure that there's diverse representation in the projects that your team is selecting. But I guess more in terms of just like the grammar of the submission, what are important things to highlight?
I mean, how relevant it is, how solution oriented it is, sometimes how simple it is, because for me, innovation can be also simple, and how much people can learn from it. Obviously, we are a visual profession also, so this plays a huge role. So we have a lot of different criteria. So I'm trying to think about like what can I name out of these different criteria that we have. And also it's different from a place to another, because also you
Yeah.
compare it with the situation, with the context, with what's happening, with the materiality, with the intervention, with the
Mhm.
integration, with let's say the challenges. Does this fit into the narrative of this place also? Like, you have to ask yourself, who is this for also? Can this serve as an inspiration for other people somewhere else, for example?
Mhm. Is it better to use fancy language and all of the architectural terms? Or
No.
are you looking, yeah, you're looking for more of like a layperson description of these higher elements?
I mean, definitely not using big words in that sense. I don't consider architectural words as big words, but I mean this needs to be inclusive.
Mhm.
Everyone needs to understand what you're writing. And in my opinion, any complex topic, you can still write it with simple words that anyone could understand. So yeah, I think this is something that is very important, especially because ArchDaily is focusing on the entire our words. Yeah, and not everyone is native speaker. I think most of us in ArchDaily are not native speakers.
Yeah, that's very true. And I didn't realize that ArcDaily was founded in Chile until I was doing a little bit more research, and I was like, wow, I mean, I guess that's the American me. I'm like, oh, everything's based in the US. Like, but it makes sense, right? That like the US is probably like a small portion of the people that are on this platform. And I really love seeing projects from all over, and the different ways that people are embracing not only like the local context, but materiality and construction solutions. So those things are helpful to see, and see like, oh, they're not just building a box that could be in any city, in any place in the world, made out of like general materials. I think that's the best, most inspirational things to see on the website.
That's good. And plus, I think our understanding of certain things, building in wood is not sustainable everywhere around the world, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the questions that we ask ourselves also. Like, how can we explain very big concepts, but also still be rooted locally, and explain that these solutions don't, by like portraying a lot of projects, we're actually showcasing that the challenges are different, similar, but also the solutions are also can be different, or what makes sense in a certain context doesn't in another.
Mm-hmm. And so, in addition to all of the project features and project stories, are there any initiatives that you have led or worked on during your time at ArchDaily that you're especially proud of, that maybe we can talk a little bit more about now?
Of course. So we have three main initiatives
Mm-hmm.
that we do on a yearly basis. The first one, it's called the Building of the Year Award. And I think this is the only award, architecture award, where people get to vote for the projects. And we
Right.
just finished this edition. We've been doing it for more than 10 years. I'm always surprised by how people vote for certain things. And it's quite eye-opening, and you understand a bit more what people want to see, what people consider as good architecture, or how they want architecture to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of our main initiatives. The other one is more of an internal selection that we have. It's called Next Practices. We look at emerging practices from around the world. Basically, we're betting on these practices and we are pushing them, highlighting their work, talking to them, interviewing them. So they're around 20 practices on a yearly basis. We try to push them as much as we can from a media perspective because we believe that they have something important to say and they have something important to contribute. Like they have a lot of contributions to do to this world. So that's the second one. And we've just started something which is called the Student Projects Awards, which is something that it's kind of like going back to the basics of ArchDaily, catering to students. For the first time, we're gonna do we're actually launching this in April.
Okay.
We're actually getting the winners in April. We already launched it. We've gathered a lot of submissions from all over the world. And we want to get closer to students because, I mean, they are rethinking the world, the future of architecture. So it's very important for us to understand what they're thinking of, how they're perceiving things, how can we get closer to them, but how can we also introduce them to the conversation and have them be part of it. So for us, it's never about us sitting somewhere and dictating the conversation or certain things. It's about sitting all of us together, whether you're a student, whether you're an emerging practice, whether you're an established firm. It's about having discussions, conversation to understand how are we shaping all of us together the future of architecture.
You mentioned you were on ArchDaily when you were in school. I was on ArchDaily constantly looking for inspiration. I think if I was a student that had my project featured on ArchDaily, I'd probably go into a coma or something. Like, it would be such a big deal. So that must be such an exciting both competition for them to enter, but then also to be selected is a huge honor, especially as a student.
I hope so. So we're trying this first edition. We did get a lot of submissions. I would have freaked out actually if I was a student, if I got featured on ArchDaily. I think it's a great push. It's also us understanding what are the thematics or what are people talking about around the world, especially in universities and especially as students. So we're going to have a long list of a lot of projects that fit into the theme, the main theme that we have established. It was about coexistence, and then we're going to have a short list, and then we're going to have a couple of winners. So it's exciting. So we have obviously an internal jury, people from ArchDaily, but also we're going to have an external jury of very established practices from all over the world who are also equally excited to see what students are actually thinking of. And
Wow, that's incredible. I can't wait to see it. And this episode will probably come out after April. So I'll say, wow, everything looked great. Yeah, congratulations to the winner who was, and I'll do blank, and then we can put their name.
Yeah. We'll probably have many winners. I don't think it's a question of having one winner. Obviously, you have undergrads, you have postgrad, you have people who are doing their bachelor, masters, etc. So people at different also stages of their studies.
And so gender is another issue that is not specifically covered in those three topics that you mentioned, but probably touches some of that. And I'll go back to another conversation I had with Pascal Sablon, who she's a leader in a lot of different initiatives regarding representation. And she had a media pledge that I think she was shopping around to different media platforms of, we want certain statistics represented, both diversity and also like women in media. Does ArchDaily have any type of initiative like that? Are you conscious of tracking gender representation on the platform and kind of what projects are featured, but also what designers and architects are featured as well?
100%. And it's it's a natural reflex that we have. So it's not something that is, let's say, written in that sense. It kind of became far more than a reflex. This is the foundation of our curation, or even how we hire people within the team. I mean, the team is mostly now made up of women. This was not intentional, but it just happened. Yeah, I mean, whether it's representation in all aspects of representation is quite a normal reflex for us now. It's not something that we don't think about it as a quota thing, but we're very conscious about it. So even whenever we have, let's say, events that we're doing, speakers that we're choosing, jurors that we're choosing, we always make sure to think about, I cannot even say that we make sure to think of, because it comes so naturally, to actually really look at a very diverse group of people. always, because I mean, ArchDaily started in Latam. It started in Chile 17 years ago, and these concepts of diversities are so anchored in everything we do. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's something that we do it consciously, but it's such a natural reflex for us that, I mean, representation is always, it's a top priority, but naturally.
Yes. And is that
I don't know if
something
that makes
where
sense.
No, it does. I think it does. Where it's, I mean, as a woman, you're probably a little bit more aware of it than maybe like if a man were in your role. But is that something that is it hard to do to like find an equal representation of what types of projects are coming in? I know sometimes there are statistically women are represented in different quantities in different areas of the profession. So perhaps in one area there's a higher focus, but maybe in another there's a lower. Is there, you're seeing certain types of projects are not getting as many diverse submissions, or is it
I
kind
would
of
say
equal?
more, I wouldn't say projects or typologies. I would say more territories. So
Okay.
if we do look for women in specific areas. We do
Hmm.
push them in specific, let's say, territories, regions in that sense. So more than something related to projects. And we do that part very consciously to, because it's, I mean, they are working in architecture, they
Hmm.
are doing great work, it's what is missing is someone to push them in certain contexts, and this is where we come in, basically.
Okay, great. So are there any areas that are doing great in terms of representation that you want to shout out, and some areas that if someone is listening from that area they should send in their project to ArchDaily?
No, I mean, in general, coming from the Middle East, I'm very happy that female figures are doing amazing work. They're everywhere. They're part of the architecture discourse. They're reshaping it, rethinking about it. So that was important for me, because when I was studying architecture, I didn't have a female professor, for example,
Hmm.
for 6 years. And I was like, how? So, and also, I think we also do is that we all know Zaha Hadid, but there are a lot of female architects
Hmm.
that have also done great work around the world, and they were pioneers in a lot of places that we also now quite push them, in the sense that we're adjusting the narrative that women did not, I don't know, participate in the architectural decisions or in the architectural realm in specific areas.
Hmm.
And obviously, Yasmin Larry is, I love her. I had
Yes.
a chance to interview her, to talk to her. And there are so many Yasmin Larrys around the world.
Yes. Wow. That, I mean, when you talked to her, like what were some of the questions that you asked her?
How did she start? Who pushed
Yeah,
her? Who encouraged her mostly?
those are all important questions.
Yeah, the interview is on YouTube. So if you
Okay,
want to check
perfect.
it
We'll go
out.
check that out. Yeah, I can put the link in the show notes if people want to go to that next. And so I think to end, what is like kind of what are you observing in the
Hmm.
industry? What are things that maybe like the biggest issue and then the biggest opportunity that you're seeing right now?
I did start with that the more I travel, the more I see architecture from different places, the more I talk to architects from different places, I see that we have very similar challenges. And around the world, it's very funny actually.
Mm-hmm.
Similar challenges, but that need different, let's say, solutions, or that will end up with different outcomes. But I'm also seeing that the world is quite weird nowadays. So you have kind of two different directions, which I don't see them technically being against each other, but you have a direction that is very much tech, AI driven, that's the future alone, not AI as a tool, but AI as like coming and taking over. And then
Yeah.
you have another direction that is becoming more human, more aware of your surrounding, more, in tune with the spaces around you, very nature driven. So I don't know why they're going in opposite directions
Mm-hmm.
when they can actually meet up, at some point, and we can think about AI as a tool, as something here to help us, rather than try to really see this as the biggest challenge of this century.
Yeah.
So yeah, the world is just going in different directions when it comes to the architectural realm.
Yeah, picking one path or the other. Is there a way that you're uniting those two in your personal life, where you're using
Yeah,
AI on a hike or whatever to
on a
combine those
hike.
two worlds?
No, but I mean, we're discussing this constantly, So we have
Hmm.
opinion pieces where we're talking about AI, where we're talking about technology, where we're talking about trying to understand this as a tool,
Yeah.
as how could it contribute to certain things. It's not removing the authorship. It's not, so I think we're still having this discussion. So we don't have, let's say, answers, let's say, yet.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
discussing this constantly, just to also have everyone become more familiarized with this, with the topic, with the subject, and not see this as a threat in a sense. So yeah.
On that note, I'm sure if people want to see more of the conversations and they want to connect with you, connect with ArchDaily, I'm sure many people know the website to go to, but can you just plug where people can connect with you and your platforms online?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on ArchDaily. You have authors, you have profiles of authors. You can find my profile, and you can find the profile of a lot of authors on ArchDaily. I would really invite people to see. We have, I think, a landing page called the Voices of ArchDaily, which are the people behind ArchDaily,
Mhm.
the writers, the curators, the editors, everyone that contributes to the conversation. And then I think it's interesting to see who, we're trying to push as much as possible our editors, just to see them more, and so that people know who are actually the ones behind these amazing conversations, but also articles and projects. But you can find a lot of them, not
Mhm.
everyone yet, on the special landing page. It's called Voices of ArchDaily on ArchDaily.
Okay, excellent. Well, I will link all of that in the show notes. People can reach out and click on there. They'll just have to scroll down on whatever platform they're on. And Christele, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to chat with you. Obviously, a big fan of ArchDaily, but I'm excited to see that the platform is both doubling down in its roots and what its values are, but is also expanding in very strategic ways to make the profession more inclusive and educational and inspirational. So thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin, so much. Very happy that we finally got to do this. It was
Yes.
a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for doing this podcast. It's very inspiring. If I was a student, like back in the days, this is something that I would have loved to hear, to listen to.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Architectette. If you loved what you heard, leave us a rating and share this episode with a friend. Check out our show notes for links to our newsletter and social media. Until next time, take care and keep building a better, more inclusive future.